hit the floor again. The cold metal pressed against her palms as she caught herself, her knees stinging from the impact. Around her, the tall crew members stopped their work and looked down at her with their large, gentle eyes. Their long legs bent at angles that seemed impossible to human joints, perfectly balanced on the curved floor. "Are you hurt, little cub?" asked the chief engineer. His voice hummed with concern, the translator chip in his ear turning his musical language into words she could understand. "I'm fine," said quickly, pushing herself up. Her cheeks burned red with embarrassment. "Just slipped again." This was the third time today, the fifth time this week. Had lost count of how many times she had fallen since joining the ship 6 months ago. The harmonious stride was beautiful, with its smooth walls that curved like waves and floors that seemed to flow from one room to another. But for a human with flat feet and straight legs, every step felt like walking on ice. Helped her stand, his three-fingered hand gentle on her arm. "Perhaps you should rest more," he suggested. "Young humans need much rest, yes." Wanted to scream that she wasn't tired, that she wasn't careless, that something was wrong with this ship. But she just nodded and mumbled a thank you. They were kind, always kind, but they treated her like a child who couldn't walk properly yet. She made her way to the engineering station where her supervisor was working. He was the only other human engineer on the ship, a man in his 40s with gray hair and tired eyes. He moved through the ship like he was walking on thin ice, slow and careful, never making sudden movements. "You need to be more mindful," said without looking up from his screen. "Watch where you step. Feel the floor before you put your weight down." "I do that," protested, "but sometimes the floor just—" "There's nothing wrong with the floor. They have been building ships for thousands of years. We're the guests here. We adapt to them, not the other way around." Bit her lip and said nothing. She had heard this speech many times before. She turned to her own workstation and tried to focus on her task, checking the oxygen mixture for the human quarters. But her mind kept wandering to the problem of the floors, the strange way gravity seemed to pull differently in different parts of the ship, the way her feet never felt quite stable. Later that day, disaster struck. Captain had invited to attend a ceremony in the ship's main hall. They were displaying their most precious artifacts to the human visitors, objects that were thousands of years old. Had been excited. She wore her best uniform and walked carefully, so carefully, into the hall. The floor there was different. It sloped gently upward in a spiral pattern perfect for the who walked on their toes. Felt the shift in gravity as she entered, a subtle pull that seemed to come from the left side. She adjusted her balance, but then the pull changed. It came from below now, then from the right. Her feet couldn't keep up with the changes. She stumbled forward, arms windmilling. She crashed into a display pedestal. The ancient sculpture on top wobbled, tilted, and fell. It hit the floor with a sound like breaking bells. The room went silent. Every eye turned too. She stood frozen, looking at the shattered pieces of blue crystal scattered across the floor. Her heart pounded so hard she thought everyone could hear it. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to." Captain approached. His face was hard to read, the way alien faces often were. "It was an accident," he said quietly. "But perhaps, young, you should remain in the human quarters for now, for everyone's safety." That night lay in her small bunk and cried. Through the thin walls, she could hear voices. Was talking to the other human intern who worked in xenobiology. "She's a liability," said. "I've tried to help her, but she won't listen. Maybe it's time to recommend she be sent back to Earth." "She's just young," replied. "Give her time." "Time won't fix clumsiness. Some people just aren't meant for space work." Pulled her pillow over her head, but she couldn't block out the words. A liability, clumsy, not meant for space work. The words hurt worse than any of her falls. But as she lay there, something changed inside her. The hurt turned into anger, and the anger turned into determination. She was an engineer. Engineers solved problems. and this ship had a problem, whether anyone else saw it or not. Got up and went to her small desk. She pulled out her personal tablet and started making notes. She wrote down every fall she could remember, where it happened, what time of day, what the gravity felt like. She pulled up the ship's basic layout plans, the ones all crew members had access to, and marked each location. A pattern started to emerge. She fell more often in certain areas: the main hall, the corridor outside the medical bay, the engineering deck between stations 3 and 7, all places where the floor curved more sharply, where the ceiling height changed, where multiple rooms connected. She started reading everything she could find about ship design. Their ships were grown as much as built, with living systems that responded to the crew. The gravity wells were created by organic field generators that could sense the crew's movements and adjust in real time. It was amazing technology, far beyond what humans had developed. But as read, a thought formed in her mind. What if the ship's sensors only knew how to read bodies? What if, when a human walked on the floors, the ship got confused? It would try to help, try to adjust the gravity to make walking easier, but it would adjust for the wrong kind of legs, the wrong kind of balance. The ship wasn't trying to make her fall. It was trying to help her, but it didn't know how. Looked at her notes, at the patterns, at the technical specifications. A wild idea started growing in her mind. It was crazy. It was probably impossible. It would definitely get her in trouble. But what if she could teach the ship to understand human bodies? What if she could make it work for both species, not just one? She opened a new file on her tablet and titled it Project Harmony. Then she started to write. She wrote plans and calculations and ideas until the ship's night cycle ended and artificial dawn filled her room with gentle light. She didn't sleep at all. When found her at her workstation the next morning, eyes red and tired but fingers flying over the keyboard, he frowned. "You look exhausted. Did you sleep?" "I'm fine," she said, not looking up. "What are you working on?" "Just some personal research," she lied, "learning more about the ship's systems." Sighed, "Just be careful, okay? And please watch where you walk today." "I will," promised. But in her mind she was thinking, soon I won't have to. For the next 3 weeks lived 2 lives. During the day she was the clumsy intern who everyone. She did her assigned tasks, checked systems, ran diagnostics, and tried not to fall too often. But at night, when most of the crew rested, she became something else. She became a hunter, tracking down the secret of why she couldn't walk on this ship. She started carrying a small device in her pocket, something she built from spare parts. It measured gravity fluctuations, magnetic fields, and pressure changes in the floor. Every time she walked anywhere, it recorded data. Every time she fell, it marked the spot. After a week, she had measurements from every major corridor and room on the ship. She stayed up late each night, turning the raw numbers into graphs and charts. The patterns were clear now. The ship's gravity fields changed constantly, shifting and flowing like water. For those who walked on their toes with their knees bent backward, these changes felt natural. Their bodies swayed and adjusted without thinking, like dancers who knew every step. But humans walked differently. Flat feet, straight legs, weight centered differently. When the ship sensed a human walking, its systems tried to compensate. They pushed and pulled in ways that would help but only made humans unstable. "It's like trying to dance when your partner doesn't know your steps," muttered to herself one night. She needed to test her theory, but she couldn't do it alone. She needed help from someone who understood both the science and the language of the ship systems. She needed. Han was a human, one of 5 humans on the ship. He was quiet and spent most of his time studying the language, not just the words but the mathematical patterns beneath them. Had talked to him a few times in the human common room. He seemed nice, if a bit shy. She found him in the observation deck, watching the stars through the massive window. He was alone, which was perfect. Approached carefully. "Can I ask you something?" He turned, surprised. "Oh, sure, what is it?" She sat down next to him and pulled out her tablet. "I need help understanding something. The ships control language the way they program their systems. Can you read it?" His eyes lit up. He loved languages the way he loved engineering. Some of it, yes, it's complex. It's not really a language like we think of it. It's more like music mixed with math. Why? Took a deep breath. This was a risk. If he told anyone what she was planning, she could be sent home, but she needed help. "I think I know why I keep falling," she said, "and I think I can fix it, but I need someone who can help me write commands the ship will understand." She showed him her data, her theories, her calculations. Eyes grew wider as he read. He asked questions, smart questions, the kind that made explain her thinking more clearly. Finally, he sat back and looked at her with something like awe. "You want to reprogram the ship," he said. "You want to teach it to understand human biomechanics." "Not reprogram," corrected. "More like, add a new language, make it bilingual, so it can help both and humans walk properly." "That's insane," said. His heart sank. "So you won't help?" "I didn't say that," he grinned. "I said it's insane, but insane doesn't mean impossible. I'll help you. This is the coolest thing anyone's asked me to work on." They became partners in secret. While worked on the engineering side, calculating exactly how the gravity fields needed to change for human bodies, worked on the language side. He translated her formulas into the musical mathematical code that the ship's systems could understand. But they needed a place to test it. They couldn't risk changing the whole ship. If they made a mistake, people could get hurt. They needed a small area, somewhere isolated. Found it in Cargo Bay 7. It was rarely used, sitting at the back of the ship where extra supplies were stored. She got permission from to practice maintenance procedures there. He agreed easily, happy that the clumsy human girl wanted to improve her skills. It took another 2 weeks to set up. Installed sensors in the floor and ceiling of the cargo bay. She connected them to a small computer she built from spare parts, loading translation code into it. The computer would talk to the ship's main systems, acting as a translator between human movements and responses. "Ready?" asked one night. They stood at the entrance to the cargo bay, both nervous and excited. "Ready," said. She activated the system and stepped onto the modified floor. At first, nothing felt different. The floor curved the same way, the gravity pulled in the same strange directions. Started to walk forward and then. It happened, the ship adjusted, but this time it adjusted correctly. The gravity shifted to support her flat feet. The pull came from directly below, steady and strong. Took another step, then another. She walked across the entire cargo bay without stumbling once. "It works," she whispered. Then louder, "It works." She started running, something she hadn't been able to do safely in 6 months. She jumped, spun around, moved freely without thinking about every step. Tears ran down her face, but she was laughing. Ran in after her, testing the floor himself. "I don't believe it," he said. "I actually don't believe it. You did it. You actually did it." But their celebration was interrupted. Alarms suddenly blared through the ship. Emergency lights flashed red. The ship's communication system crackled to life. "All crew to emergency stations. Meteor debris field detected. Impact in 2 minutes." And ran from the cargo bay, their moment of triumph forgotten. The ship shook as small pieces of debris hit the shields. The lights flickered. Through the corridor windows, could see chunks of rock bouncing off the energy barriers that protected the ship. Then a larger piece hit. The shields flared bright, then failed. The rock tore through the outer hull somewhere ahead. Air began rushing out, pulling everything toward the breach. The ship's gravity systems went crazy, trying to compensate, adjusting wildly in every direction. Saw a head in the corridor. He was thrown against a wall as gravity shifted. The xenobiology intern tumbled past him. All around, crew members struggled to stay on their feet. The managed better, their flexible legs adapting quickly, but even they had trouble with such wild changes. But had spent 6 months learning to predict these shifts. She had measured them, charted them, studied them. While everyone else fought against the gravity changes, she worked with them. She pushed off a wall just as gravity shifted right, letting it carry her forward. She grabbed a handrail as the pull reversed, using the momentum to swing around a corner. The emergency station was ahead. She could see it through the chaos. Someone needed to reach it and activate the emergency hull seals, or the whole section would lose air. The crew were trying, but they were too far away, fighting through the tumbling debris and panicked crowd. Calculated the next gravity shift based on everything she knew. She waited for exactly the right moment, then jumped. Gravity pulled her in a curve, right toward the emergency station. She slammed into it hard, her ribs screaming in pain, but her hand found the activation switch. She pulled it, barriers slammed down, sealing the breach. The gravity stabilized. The alarms went quiet. For a moment, everyone just breathed hard, checking themselves for injuries. Then walked over to where stood, still clutching the emergency panel. "How did you do that?" he asked quietly. "How did you move through the chaos like that?" Looked at him, then at Anne, who were watching her with new expressions. Not pity, not concern, something like respect. "I've been paying attention," she said simply. "To every fall, every stumble. I learned how this ship moves." Later in the human common room sat next to. "I owe you an apology," she said. "I thought you were just clumsy, but you're not, are you? You've been studying the ship this whole time." Shrugged. "I had to. Nobody else was going to figure out why humans can't walk here properly." "Did you," asked, "figure it out?" Smiled. "Yes, and I know how to fix it, but I'm going to need your help." Request to access the ship's environmental engineering systems came 3 days after the meteor incident. She submitted the formal request through, keeping her tone respectful and curious. "I want to learn more about technology," she wrote, "to better understand how to work safely aboard the ship." Approved it immediately. The old engineer had seen reach the emergency station during the crisis. He had watched her move through impossible gravity shifts like she could predict them. If the clumsy human cub wanted to learn, he would teach her. "You have limited access," he explained, showing her the systems on his screen. "You can view the environmental protocols, study the gravity field generators, read the maintenance logs, but you cannot change anything. These systems keep us alive. They are not for experiments." "I understand," said, trying to keep the excitement out of her voice. "Thank you." What didn't know was that limited access was all needed. She wasn't going to change the ship's main systems directly. That would be too dangerous and too obvious. Instead, she was going to build a bridge between what the ship knew and what it needed to learn. She shared her plan with, and that night, they met in Cargo Bay 7, which had become their secret laboratory. Was there too. He was a young human security officer, only 23, who had brought into their group. She needed someone who could watch for patrols and give warnings if anyone came near the cargo bay during their work. "The ship is like a person who only speaks one language," explained, showing them diagrams on her tablet. "It knows bodies perfectly. Every movement, every weight shift, every muscle tension. It reads those signals and adjusts the gravity to help them walk smoothly." "But it can't read human bodies," said, understanding. "So when we walk, it gets confused." "Exactly. It tries to help, but it helps wrong. The solution isn't to change how the ship thinks about. That works fine. We need to add a second pattern, a second language, so it can recognize humans as different, not broken." "How?" asked. "The ship's programming is biological. It's not like a computer where you just add new code." "We create a translator layer," said, pointing to another part of his diagram. "A protocol that sits between the ship's sensors and its gravity systems. When it detects a human, it translates those signals into patterns the ship can understand, then translates the ship's response back into movements that help humans." It's like teaching the ship to be bilingual, said. And I've already tested it here in the cargo bay. It works. Now we just need to expand it to the whole ship. Looked worried. That's a big step if something goes wrong. I know, interrupted gently. That's why we need to be careful. We need to test it more, make sure it's stable, and do it in stages. For the next month, they worked in secret. Schedule became a careful dance of normal work during the day and secret modifications at night. She would finish her assigned tasks, eat dinner with the crew, and then excuse herself to rest in the human quarters. But instead of sleeping, she would slip out and meet the others in Cargo Bay 7. The translator protocol grew more sophisticated. With her biology knowledge, helped them understand the subtle differences between human and balance. She explained how human inner ears worked, how their feet felt pressure, how their brains processed spatial awareness. All of this information went into the protocol, making it smarter and more responsive. Refined the language, making it more efficient. The first version had been clumsy, slow to react, but with each iteration it got faster. Soon the response time was down to milliseconds, fast enough that humans wouldn't even notice the adjustment happening. Proved invaluable in ways hadn't expected. As a security officer, he knew the ship's patrol patterns, maintenance schedules, and quiet periods. He planned their work sessions to avoid detection, and twice warned them just in time when crew members passed nearby. But he did more than that. He tested their modifications, walking through the cargo bay in different situations. He ran, jumped, carried heavy objects, moved quickly and slowly. Each test helped refine the system. "This is amazing," he said one night after a particularly good test. "I feel normal again, like I did back on Earth. I didn't realize how much I missed just walking without thinking about it." The night came when decided they were ready for the big step. She had created the translator protocol as a subroutine that could be inserted into the ship's environmental systems during a standard maintenance cycle. It would look like a normal calibration update, the kind that happened automatically every month. The next maintenance cycle was in 3 days. Needed access codes to upload her subroutine, codes that only senior engineering staff had. She went too. "I've been working on a project," she said carefully, "an improvement to the environmental systems. I'd like to implement it during the next maintenance cycle." Looked up from his work, suspicious. "What kind of improvement?" "Better support for human crew members. Small adjustments to make the ship more comfortable for us." "The ship is fine. We've been managing for years by being careful." "We shouldn't have to just manage," said, her frustration showing. "We're part of this crew too. The ship should work for us, not against us." His expression hardened. "No, whatever you're planning, I can't support it. We're guests here. You need to accept that and stop trying to change everything." Left his office angry and disappointed, but she wasn't giving up. If wouldn't help, she would find another way. That evening she approached. "I need your security codes," she said, "for the engineering systems." "That could get me fired," said, "if they find out." "They won't," promised. "I'll make it look like a standard update, but I need those codes to upload the translator protocol." Was quiet for a long moment, then he nodded. "Okay, I believe in what you're doing. Give me an hour." True to his word, came back with the codes. He had borrowed them from his supervisor's system, using a loophole in the security protocols that would make the access look routine. The night of the maintenance cycle, barely breathed. She sat at her workstation, watching the ship systems run through their automatic updates. At exactly the right moment, she inserted her subroutine into the update stream. It flowed into the ship's biological programming like water mixing with water, invisible and seamless. The upload completed, the maintenance cycle finished, everything looked normal. Stood up carefully and took a step, then another. The floor felt different just slightly in a way she couldn't quite name. It felt right. She walked to the corridor and moved with increasing confidence. No stumbling, no careful balance. She walked like a human should walk, natural and easy. In the human quarters, she heard surprised voices. Other humans were noticing the change too, emerging from their rooms with confused expressions. "Does the ship feel different to anyone else?" someone asked. "I just walked from the bathroom without holding the wall," another said, amazed. But in the sections, confusion was turning to concern. The ship felt wrong to them, responding just a little too slowly, the gravity not quite as perfectly tuned. Captain called an emergency engineering review. Ran diagnostics and found the subroutine immediately. His three-fingered hands moved quickly over the controls, tracing the code back to its source. Back to access signature, borrowed from codes. The next morning was called to the captain's ready room. Was there, looking disappointed. Was there, looking angry. Captain stood at the center, his tall form imposing. "Explain," the captain said simply. His hands shook, but her voice was steady. "I modified the environmental systems to recognize human biomechanics. The ship can now optimize for both and human crew members simultaneously." "Without permission," said. "You compromised ship safety for your own comfort." "I didn't compromise anything," said, her fear turning to defiance. "I improved it." "You're a 19-year-old intern," said quietly. "You have no authority to make changes like this. What you've done could have killed us all." "Then let me prove it works," said, looking directly at Captain. "Give me a chance to demonstrate. If I'm wrong, you can remove it and send me home. But if I'm right, you'll see that I haven't compromised anything. I've made the ship better." Captain looked at for a long moment. His face was difficult to read, as alien faces often were, but his large eyes seemed thoughtful, not angry. Finally, he gestured to the door. "Show me," he said. They walked through the ship together, a strange parade. Captain led the way, followed by and came last, her heart pounding. Other crew members watched them pass, whispering to each other. They stopped in the main corridor, the one where had fallen most often during her first months on the ship. The floor curved and twisted here, beautiful to look at but treacherous for human feet. "Call the other humans," Captain ordered. Arrived first then and two more humans came, crew members from other departments. They all looked nervous, unsure why they had been summoned. "Walk," the captain said to them. "Move as you normally would." The humans exchanged glances. Then, understanding what was being tested, stepped forward. He walked down the corridor slowly, carefully, the way he had for years. But even with his caution, his movements were stiff and awkward. He looked like someone walking on a frozen lake, afraid it might break. "Faster," Captain commanded. Tried, he moved quicker, but his balance wavered. His arms spread out for stability. He made it to the end of the corridor, but barely. "Now you," the captain said. Walked confidently. His steps were natural, easy. He moved at a normal pace, then jogged, then ran. At the end of the corridor, he turned and sprinted back. He stopped in front of the captain without stumbling, barely breathing hard. "How is this possible?" asked Starring. "Let me," volunteered. She walked the same path, then demonstrated more complex movements. She bent down to touch the floor, stood up quickly, walked sideways, even jumped. Every movement was smooth and controlled. Watched with his mouth open. "I don't understand," he said. "I've been on this ship for 3 years. I've never been able to move like that." "Because the ship didn't know how to help you," explained. "It only knew how to help, now it knows both." Captain turned to his chief engineer. "Explain how this is possible. You said the ship's biological systems cannot support multiple species simultaneously. The computational load would be too great." Was already pulling up data on his handheld device. His 3 fingers danced over the screen, calling up system reports and processing logs. His expression changed from anger to confusion to amazement. "This shouldn't work," he muttered. "The processing overhead should be, but it isn't. The efficiency is actually better than before. How?" "I didn't override your systems," said quietly. I added a translation layer. It's like a bridge between what the ship already knows and what it needs to learn. The ship still processes movements the same way, but when it detects human movement patterns, my protocol translates them into something the ship can understand. "Show me the code," demanded. Pulled out her tablet and displayed the subroutine. Studied it, his large eyes scanning the complex patterns of biological programming language. Stood nearby, ready to explain the linguistic elements if needed. "This is elegant," said slowly. "You didn't force the ship to learn a new system. You taught it that humans are a variant form, not a broken form. You gave it context." "Exactly," said, relief flooding through her. "The ship wanted to help humans all along, it just didn't know how." Captain called for more tests. Over the next hour, all 5 humans aboard the ship demonstrated the difference. They walked, ran, carried objects, performed complex movements. Every action was smooth and natural. Even, who had moved carefully for years, found himself running down corridors without fear. But the crew were still concerned about their own experience. Several reported that the ship felt different, not quite right. Ran more diagnostics while a group of crew members walked through the same corridor. The results surprised everyone. The movements were just as smooth as before. The response time was only slightly slower by mere milliseconds, imperceptible to conscious thought. The ship was supporting both species perfectly. "I don't understand," one of the engineers said. "If the system works for both, why does it feel different to us?" "Because you noticed the change," suggested carefully. "You've walked on this ship for so long that you know exactly how it should feel. Any tiny difference stands out. But objectively, the support you're receiving is the same. Your mind is just because you know something changed." Tested this theory by having crew members walk through sections of the ship without telling them which sections had been modified. When they didn't know whether a corridor was running the new protocol or not, they couldn't tell the difference. The change was real but psychological. Captain called a meeting of his senior staff. Was asked to present her work to all of them, explaining the technical details and the theory behind her modification. She spoke for over an hour, answering questions and demonstrating data. The engineers asked question after question. How did she identify the problem? How did she design the solution? How did she ensure safety? Answered each one, sometimes with help from end. Finally, one of the senior engineers, a female named asked the question that mattered most. "Why did you see this problem when no one else did? We've had human crew members for decades. No one has ever suggested this solution before." Thought about her answer carefully. "Because I fell," she said simply. "Every day, multiple times a day. Every fall hurt and every fall was embarrassing. But I'm an engineer. I couldn't just accept that falling was normal. So I studied every fall like it was data. I measured it, analyzed it, looked for patterns. I lived the problem in a way that someone who could walk normally never would." "Your clumsiness was actually observation," said, understanding in her voice. "I was never clumsy," said quietly. "I was incompatible, and there's a difference." The meeting ended with Captain making a decision. He would keep the modification active for a trial period of 1 month. If no safety issues emerged, it would become permanent. He also ordered a full review of the code by the engineering team. But he had one more thing to say. "What you did was brilliant, but it was also dangerous and unauthorized. You put yourself and this crew at risk by making changes without proper approval. That cannot be ignored." His heart sank. "I understand." "However," the captain continued, "you also solved a problem that has existed for generations. You made this ship better for all species aboard. Your methods were wrong, but your results are remarkable. You will receive a formal reprimand in your record. You will also receive a commendation for innovative engineering. Both are deserved." Over the next few days, word of modification spread through the ship. The human crew members were overjoyed. They could finally move naturally, work efficiently, live normally. They thanked every time they saw her. But something unexpected also happened. The crew, once they adjusted to the tiny difference, became fascinated by the concept. Asked to give a lecture to the engineering department about her design process. Other crew members asked questions about human biomechanics and how the differences affected their experience of the ship. Came to her quarters one evening. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I told you to accept the way things were. I thought that was wisdom, but it was just resignation. You were right to question it. You were right to try to fix it." "You were trying to help me fit in," said. "I understand that." "I was teaching you to make yourself smaller," corrected, "to take up less space. But you were right to take up the space you needed. Thank you for being brave when I wasn't." The most surprising response came from Captain himself. 1 week after the implementation, he called to his ready room again. This time, the mood was different. "I have been in contact with the Galactic Council Engineering Committee," he said. "I sent them your work. They want to meet you." His eyes widened. "They do. They are very interested in your adaptive multi-species protocols. Apparently, this is a problem that many ships struggle with. Crews with multiple species often have difficulty because each ship is designed for one species only. Your solution could change that." "I was just trying to stop falling," said, overwhelmed. "You did more than that," the captain said. "You saw a problem everyone else had accepted as unsolvable. You refused to accept it, and you created something new. That is the mark of a true engineer, not someone who maintains systems, but someone who builds new ones." The Galactic Council Engineering Summit was held on Station Prime, a massive space station that orbited a blue star at the center of known space. Ships from 100 different species docked at its ports, bringing representatives from across the galaxy. Had never seen so many different kinds of beings in one place. She stood in the presentation hall, looking out at the audience. There were like those she knew, but also with their fish-like bodies floating in water-filled suits. There were with 6 legs and crystalline skin. There were beings she couldn't even name, with forms so strange she could barely understand how they moved. All of them were here to hear about her work. Captain introduced her. "This is human engineer from Earth. She is 19 years old and has created something that may change how we build ships forever." 19. The number felt young when said aloud like that. Saw some beings in the audience exchange looks. A few whispered to each other, but she stepped up to the presentation platform and began. She told them about falling, about being called clumsy, about how embarrassing it was to stumble in front of the entire crew day after day. She showed them her data, the measurements she had taken secretly for months. She explained how she realized the ship wasn't broken and neither was she. They were just speaking different languages. Then she showed them the solution. The translator protocol, the adaptive systems, the way biological ship programming could learn to recognize multiple species not as variations of one template, but as distinct forms. She demonstrated with videos of humans walking on the harmonious stride before and after the modification. The audience was silent as she spoke. Couldn't tell if it was good silence or bad silence. Her hands shook, but she kept going. When she finished, an old engineer raised one of his tentacles. "You are saying that all our ships have this problem, that we have been building incorrectly for generations." "Not incorrectly," said carefully. "Your ships work perfectly for your species. But when we mix crews, when different species try to live together on one ship, we've just accepted that some people will struggle. I'm saying we don't have to accept that anymore." An engineer spoke next, her voice translated through earpiece. "The computational requirements for this must be enormous. How can biological systems handle multiple recognition patterns?" "They already do," explained. "Every ship already adapts to hundreds of small variations among its own species. Tall and short crew members, young and old, injured and healthy. My protocol just expands that range. It's not adding a new system. It's teaching the existing system to recognize a wider variety of normal. More questions came. Technical questions about processing speed, safety protocols, implementation challenges. Answered each one, sometimes with help from who sat in the front row, sometimes from who had come to support her. Finally, a small being in the back raised a thin arm. The translator identified them as a species wasn't familiar with. "I am not an engineer," they said. "I am a ship captain. I have a crew of 4 different species. Every day, 3 of those species struggle to move on my ship, which was built for my people. You are telling me this can be fixed?" "Yes," said simply. "That's exactly what I'm telling you." The stood up. "Then I would like to hire you. Name your price." Suddenly, others were standing too. A dozen voices called out, asking if could work on their ships, their stations, their habitats. The moderator had to call for order. "Please," the moderator said, a tall with gray streaks in his fur, "is still a student intern. She is not available for private contracts." "Actually," said a new voice, "she is available for public contracts." Ambassador walked into the hall. She was the senior human representative to the Galactic Council and had met her once briefly when first joining the Harmonious Stride. The ambassador approached the platform. "Miss, the Earth government would like to offer you a position as special engineering consultant to the Galactic Council. You would work with different species and ships, implementing and teaching your adaptive protocols. You would be paid well, and you would help make space safer and more comfortable for everyone." Stared at her. "I'm 19, she said weakly. "I'm not even done with my engineering degree." "You built something that engineers with decades of experience never thought to build," the ambassador said gently. "Sometimes the best qualifications aren't written on paper. They're proven through action. Will you accept?" Looked out at the audience. At beings from across the galaxy who struggled on their own ships, just like she had struggled. At the hope in their faces. At the possibility of making their lives better. "Yes," she said, "I'll do it." The next 6 months were a blur. Traveled from ship to ship, station to station, working with engineers from dozens of species. Each one presented new challenges. The needed modifications that worked in liquid environments. They had 6 legs and 3 independent balance centers. There were species that saw in ultraviolet, species that sensed magnetic fields, species that moved in ways could barely comprehend. But the basic principle was always the same. Measure the biomechanics, understand how they moved naturally, teach the ship to recognize them as valid, not broken, build the translator protocol, test and refine. Came with her studying the biology of each new species. Came too, learning new languages and helping translate them into ship code. Even joined eventually, leaving his security post to become part of his team. They called themselves the Harmony Project. Stayed on the Harmonious Stride, but he sent messages every week. He told her about new human engineers who joined the ship and walked confidently from their first day. He told her how the crew now studied mixed species design in their training programs. He told her how proud he was of her. The work was hard. Some species were difficult to measure. Some ship systems were too old or too rigid to modify easily. There were failures and setbacks, but slowly, ship by ship, the galaxy started to change. 1 year after the engineering summit, returned to the Harmonious Stride. The ship had been designated as the first official multi-species research vessel, a template for a new generation of ships. Her Cargo Bay 7 laboratory was now an official engineering research station. Captain greeted her at the airlock. "Welcome home, consultant." "It's good to be back," said smiling. They walked through the ship together. The corridors were crowded now with more species than before. A floated past in his water suit. 2 engineers worked on a panel, their 6 legs giving them perfect balance. A group of young trainees from 5 different species walked together, talking and laughing. No one stumbled. No one struggled. They moved like they belonged there because they did. "You've changed the galaxy," Captain said quietly. "I just wanted to stop falling," replied. That's how all great changes start, with someone who refuses to accept that pain is normal, someone who says, "This hurts and I will fix it." Someone who is brave enough to be called clumsy while they figure out that the problem was never them. That evening stood in the observation deck, the same place where she had first asked for help. The stars looked the same, but everything else had changed. She had changed. Her tablet beeped. A new message from Ambassador. Another ship needed help, the Morning Glory, which carried 7 different species. The captain said crew members were getting injured from falls and collisions. Would the Harmony Project take the case? Smiled and typed her reply, "We're on our way." She looked back at the stars. Somewhere out there were millions of ships, billions of beings, all trying to live and work together in a galaxy too big for any one species to fill alone. They needed each other. They needed ships that worked for everyone. And they needed engineers who had been clumsy enough to notice what everyone else had missed. Had spent 6 months falling, embarrassed and hurt and frustrated. But every fall had taught her something. Every stumble had been data. Every moment of pain had been a lesson in what needed to change. She wasn't clumsy. She had never been clumsy. She had been a scientist conducting an experiment, even if she hadn't known it at the time. She had been an engineer identifying a problem, even when everyone else called it a personal failure. Most importantly, she had been someone who refused to accept that she was the problem when the real problem was the system. And that refusal, that stubborn insistence that she deserved to walk freely, had changed everything. "Ready for the next one?" asked, joining her at the window. "Always," said. They stood together, watching the stars. Behind them, crew members of a dozen species walked through the harmonious stride, each moving with natural grace, each supported perfectly by a ship that had learned to speak their language. And ahead of them the galaxy waited, full of ships that needed fixing, species that needed help, and problems that everyone else thought were impossible. But had learned something important over the past year. Impossible just meant no one had tried the right solution yet. And sometimes, the right solution came from the person everyone thought was too young, too clumsy, too inexperienced to matter. Sometimes, the person who kept falling was actually the person who was paying the most attention. And that attention, that refusal to accept pain as normal, that determination to fix what was broken, that was what changed the galaxy. One ship at a time, one species at a time. One person who decided that walking freely wasn't too much to ask for, and who was brave enough to rebuild the world until everyone else could walk freely too. The harmonious stride jumped to hyperspace, heading toward the morning glory and whatever challenges waited there. In the observation deck, smiled. She had been called clumsy for 6 months, but she had used those 6 months to teach the stars how to walk with humanity, and if she could do that, she could do anything.